Alright guys, welcome back to part 2 of 16 things you need to know before setting up a saltwater reef tank. Let's get into it. Alright, so we're at number 9. Number 9 is coral placement. Where should I put my coral? Where should I put my acropora? Where should I put my acans? Where should I put my chalice coral? What's the right lighting? What's the right flow? Because guess what? It's not every coral makes it in every spot in every tank, no matter where you place it. In fact, most coral have very specific needs as far as lighting and flow requirements, and even based on the fish that you have. So some fish are just bottom grazers. These ones aren't. But some fish, let's see if he's under there. It's kind of hard to see him, but I have a little goby who does a lot of sand sifting. You can see he covers up this coral. I usually blast it off 2 or 3 times a day. But if you have a tank with a lot of bottom dwellers, your coral might not make it on the bottom because they might get covered in sand consistently throughout the day. If you have fish that nip at corals and you have all your corals higher up in the tank and there's more light, they're going to see the polyps and they're going to want to nip at them more. And that's just regarding fish. So now there's lighting requirements. So acropora, on average, most acropora, not every acropora, there's some deep water ones, but most acropora and most SPS corals prefer higher lighting. When I say higher lighting, that can range anywhere from 200 up to 350 par, even more if you acclimate your corals to it. But I consider that to be high lighting. Lower lighting is going to be 75 to 150, medium lighting 150 to 200. But yeah, and most LPS, they prefer lower lighting. So you got your acans, your chalice, bower bankies, blastomussa, symphilia, lobos. Mushrooms are soft coral. More mushrooms. Yeah, these guys are really doing well. I was just cutting the crap out of all my mushrooms. There's a couple OG bounces, and I got this guy just the other day too. Super cool. Super cool piece. But so yeah, a lot of LPS prefer lower lighting, and the cool thing about the lower lighting corals, most of them actually prefer lower flow. And the cool thing about the higher lighting corals, acropora and some other SPS, they prefer medium to higher flow. So it actually helps if you put your wave makers higher in your tank, so you get higher light and higher flow for the corals who want it. And then no wave makers in the bottom, so you get lower light and lower flow for the corals that need lower lighting and flow. So, I mean, there's lots of ways to really balance out your tank, and you can, most wave makers, you can angle them, you can direct the flow, even the lighting. So like the lighting on my tank here, these are really easy. I can tilt them back and forward. I really don't change my lighting a lot. Sometimes for the videos I'll angle them forward a little bit like that, just so it lights up some of the coral in the front lower part of my tank, because most of the time these guys are only getting about 75 to 100 par. For my videos, I've never tested what it's like to angle the lighting down towards them, but I'm guessing it probably bumps it up to 100 to 150 in most spots. But yeah, it's something that every hobbyist needs to think about, because you can't just buy any coral and just slap it anywhere in the tank and just expect it to do well. You need to know what that coral needs, and you need to be able to provide for that coral in a way that's going to be able to keep it alive. So coral placement is number 9. Oh, and one more quick thought on coral placement is the coral that you're putting next to each other, are they going to fight? So, for example, if this acropora tipped over on these Mardi Gras bounce mushrooms. I'm assuming that the acropora is probably going to sting the crap out of the mushroom. Some mushrooms are pretty resilient and strong, but they're probably going to fight. Same thing, you know, over here. If this acan and Walt Disney got into a fight, I'm assuming that the Walt Disney acro would win. So, and sweeper tentacles, that's why I have all these chalices grouped together, acans grouped together. You know, that's why I try to group them together as best I can, because sweeper tentacles can come out and they can attack each other. Not too long ago, this acan right here puffed out super big, and this guy, a snail, went in the corner and pushed this acanthophilia over, and they actually started touching right here, and you can see the tentacles out from the acan here, and it started stinging the edge of the donut acanthophilia coral, and it was killing the flesh on it. And I'm thankful I caught it right away, because that's like a $800 coral right there. But yeah, it was hard. It was a hard thing to watch, so I had to separate them and put a little distance between them again. So that's another thing, is, are the corals you're putting next to each other, are they going to be safe next door to another coral of a different species? If not, then it's better to just keep them grouped together close by one another, because most corals of the same species, they won't fight each other. They won't try to kill each other, with the rare exception of once in a while. That's why you got to go back to the research, right? And research your corals. Okay, number 10. We talked a little bit about it with number 9. Number 10 is fish and coral compatibility with other fish and with other coral. So this is a tough lesson I've had to learn a few different times, and I'm kind of going to share a little bit of some story with you guys. Is buying the wrong fish for the wrong reasons. Or wait, let me rephrase that. Buying the right fish for the wrong reasons. Okay, so what I mean by that is it's the right fish to me, but it's the wrong reasons for the tank. So I buy the right fish for me thinking, oh, this is a really pretty fish, I want to put it in my tank. But my tank says, wrong, I don't want this fish in me, I don't want it, it's going to destroy the coral, it's going to attack other fish. So a good example is, one time I decided to do one of those Hawaiian blue spotted puffer fish, and it was so cute, and I've always wanted a puffer fish, and my wife even liked it. And this is quite a while back, when I still had, I think, my 75-gallon tank. And I get it home, I put it in my frag tank for a while and let it sit in there. That was also my fish quarantine tank. And I was like, man, he's just doing so well. He wasn't biting any of the coral or anything. So I moved him in to my larger system. And a few days later, I started to notice that all the acros in my tank, their polyps weren't coming out. So you can see all the little polyps blowing around in the current. And all my acros in the tank were shut up. All of them. And at first I was like, what the heck's going on? I thought something was wrong with my water chemistry, or I had to have had a problem with something, you know, maybe I got something bad in the tank. And one night I came out and I caught him, and he was actually just circling one of the acropora and just hammering it, like literally just doosh, doosh, doosh. And I was like, oh crap. And so I tried to get them out. I put a fish trap in there. I put the nets in there. I tried to bait him with food. I tried so many different things, and I just couldn't get him. He just kept going in like the crevices and the rocks and behind the rocks. And I got so frustrated, and I know a lot of you guys have probably shared in this situation or had similar experiences, and you just get so angry and you think to yourself, I'm just going to kill this fish. If I ever catch this thing, I'll just squish it between my fingers. Sorry if that was a little graphic, but I was mad, like angry. And so I wound up having to take out half of the rocks in my tank, which hurt my tank big time. And what I mean by hurt it big time is coral, when you put them in a spot and they get used to that flow and used to that lighting, they really start to like it, and they get used to it, and then they become dependent on that. And so when you move your whole tank around and take them out of that position, all of a sudden you're switching up their environment on them again, throwing them off, and it can cause some stress. It can cause what I think the coral would be frustrated as. And so it really was a pain, and also because the coral stops growing and it has to get readjusted and reacclimated again, and that can take quite a while, especially if you want coral to really grow and take off. You want as few changes as possible. And another situation where I had, and I added a couple of fish, was I added one too many tangs to this tank. When I first set it up, I had 3 different tangs in here, but one of them was just a jerk. I had a lieutenant tang, I had a powder blue tang, and a chocolate tang were the 3 ones. And the powder blue tang was the biggest jerk tang that I'd ever owned in my life. And same story with him again. I just couldn't get him out of the tank. So I wound up having to take almost everything out of this tank, which, yeah, you can picture that. It was a nightmare. So making sure that fish are compatible with other fish and with other coral is a huge one. And again, I'm going to point us back to research. Do your research. I live by a new rule now for this tank. If I even suspect it might be a problem or have the potential to have an issue, I just don't do it. If I had a much larger tank that, was maybe 300 gallons and tons of space, I might make a few little compromises, but my new general rule is if I even suspect that it's going to cause issues, I just try to stay away from it. There's plenty of options for fish, there's plenty of options for coral, and if other people say it's not working, it's almost certainly not going to work for you. And I do know that once in a while there is a rare case that something does work out, but don't listen to the one person over the many. So number 10 is fish and coral compatibility with other fish and with other coral.